The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't clouds or smoke. It was ships. Massive alien vessels that appeared without warning, blocking out the sun across every major city on Earth. Within minutes, every screen on the planet showed the same image. She stood before humanity like a goddess from a nightmare. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her eyes burned crimson, and when she spoke, her voice echoed inside people's heads rather than through their ears. She called herself Queen Nixara, ruler of the Valtrine Empire. She said Earth now belonged to her. Then something happened that no human could explain or resist. People everywhere felt it. A crushing weight pressed down on their souls, a primal terror that screamed at them to submit. World leaders knelt in their offices. Soldiers dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. Parents knelt in front of their children. The entire planet bowed, except for one man. Jiho was replacing a coolant valve on the 43rd floor of the Seoul Space Elevator Station when the hologram appeared. He heard the gasps and screams from the main platform below. He climbed down the maintenance ladder, his toolbox hanging from his belt, and walked into the central hub. Everyone was kneeling. His supervisor, the security guards, the tourists who had been taking photos 5 minutes ago. 200 people pressed their foreheads to the floor while the massive hologram of Queen Nixara floated above them, her crimson eyes sweeping across the crowd. Jiho stood there, wrench still in his hand, and felt nothing. He didn't feel afraid. He didn't feel the urge to kneel. He just felt confused about why everyone else was acting so strange. The hologram didn't even look that impressive to him. Just another alien, he supposed. Earth had made contact with 3 other species in the last 50 years. This one just had better special effects. "Jiho!" someone hissed at him. It was Mina, his co-worker, her face pressed against the floor. "Get down! What's wrong with you?" He looked at her, then at the hologram, then back at her. "Why? It's just a projection. Just get down!" Mina's voice cracked with panic. Jiho shrugged and knelt beside her. It seemed easier than arguing, but he didn't press his forehead to the floor like everyone else. He just rested on his knees, waiting for whatever this was to be over so he could finish his shift. The hologram spoke again. Queen Nixara announced that humanity would serve the Valtrine Empire. Resistance was impossible. Their technology was superior. Their power was absolute. Any who defied them would be made examples. All humans would learn to worship their new masters. The hologram vanished. Slowly, people began to stand, shaking and crying. Some vomited. Others just stared into space with empty eyes. Mina grabbed Jiho's arm so hard her fingernails drew blood. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. "Did you feel what she did to us?" "I felt you grab my arm," Jiho said, pulling away gently. "What happened?" Mina stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The massive screens switched to emergency broadcasts. Every government on Earth was surrendering. The president of Korea appeared on screen, his face wet with tears, and declared that humanity accepted Valtrine rule. It took 3 days for the Valtrine to establish control. Their ships landed in every major city. Their soldiers marched through the streets, tall and pale and beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. Anyone who saw them in person felt that same crushing urge to submit. Riots broke out in some cities. The Valtrine ended them in minutes without firing a single shot. They just walked into the crowds, and everyone fell to their knees. Jiho continued going to work. The space elevator still needed maintenance. Coolant valves didn't care about alien invasions. His supervisor stopped coming to work after the first day, so Jiho just did his job alone. It was quieter that way. He preferred it. On the 4th day, Mina came back to work. She looked like she hadn't slept since the arrival. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hands shook when she tried to type at her console. "Why are you here?" Jiho asked, offering her coffee from his thermos. "Because hiding at home is worse," she said, taking the coffee with trembling hands. "At least here I can pretend things are normal. At least here I have you." They worked in silence for most of the day. The station was nearly empty. Most staff had either fled the city or were too afraid to leave their homes. But the elevator kept running. The Valtrine wanted it operational. They had plans for it. "Jiho," Mina said suddenly during their lunch break, "that first day, when the Queen appeared, you didn't feel it, did you?" He paused with his sandwich halfway to his mouth. "Feel what?" "The fear. The pressure. Like something was reaching inside your chest and squeezing your heart, like you'd die if you didn't kneel." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Everyone felt it. Everyone. I asked around, but you just stood there." Jiho set down his sandwich. He'd been avoiding thinking about this. "I didn't feel anything unusual." "That's not normal, Jiho. Maybe I'm just weird." He tried to smile, but Mina didn't smile back. "You need to be careful," she said. "The Valtrine have been scanning people, testing them. I heard they're looking for anyone who might be resistant to their control. If they find out you didn't kneel—" "I did kneel," Jiho pointed out. "You told me to." "But you didn't want to. You didn't need to." Mina leaned closer. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't do anything to make them notice you." Jiho promised, but it was already too late. The security footage from the first day had been analyzed by Valtrine intelligence systems. In every camera angle from every location on Earth, millions of humans knelt within seconds of Queen Nixara's appearance. The Valtrine AI had flagged exactly 17 anomalies. People who had taken longer than average to kneel. People who might have shown resistance. 16 of those anomalies were eventually explained. Blind people who couldn't see the hologram, deaf people who couldn't hear it, people who had been unconscious or in sealed environments. But the 17th anomaly was different. A man at the Seoul space elevator station who had stood upright for 43 seconds while everyone around him bowed. A man who had only knelt after someone spoke to him. A man whose body language showed no fear response whatsoever. His name was flagged in the Valtrine database. Orders were issued. Within hours, a Valtrine strike team was deployed to investigate this impossible human. Jiho finished his shift and rode the elevator down to ground level, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. He walked home through streets that were eerily quiet, past buildings where Valtrine propaganda already covered the walls. He stopped at a convenience store that was somehow still open and bought instant noodles for dinner. That night, he ate alone in his small apartment, watching the news coverage of Earth's surrender. He felt sad about it, the way someone might feel sad about bad weather. It was unpleasant, but what could you do? He washed his dishes, brushed his teeth, and went to bed. He dreamed of nothing, as always. Jiho never remembered his dreams. He didn't know that Commander Vexith himself was reviewing his file at that very moment. He didn't know that Queen Nixara had been personally informed about the human who hadn't knelt. He didn't know that she had smiled when she heard about him, a cold smile that had terrified even her own advisors. "Bring him to me," she had said. "I want to meet this fascinating creature." Tomorrow, when Jiho went to work, Valtrine soldiers would be waiting for him. Tomorrow, his ordinary life would end. Tomorrow, he would learn that being different in a conquered world was the most dangerous thing a person could be. But tonight, Jiho slept peacefully, dreaming of nothing at all. The Valtrine soldiers arrived at dawn. Jiho was making coffee when he heard the heavy footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. He opened the door before they could knock, still holding his mug. 3 soldiers stood there, impossibly tall and graceful. Their armor seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed with a faint purple light. Just looking at them made most humans feel dizzy and afraid. Jiho felt annoyed that they were blocking his way to work. "Jiho?" the lead soldier asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes. Can I help you?" The soldier tilted his head slightly. His companions shifted their weight, hands moving toward weapons. They had expected fear. They had expected him to collapse to his knees. This casual greeting confused them. "You will come with us for processing," the lead soldier said. Jiho checked his watch. "I have to be at work in 30 minutes. Can we do this later?" "Now." The soldier's voice grew harder, and he pushed a pulse of psychic energy at Jiho. It was a technique that usually made humans weep and beg. Jiho just blinked. "Okay," Jiho said. "Let me get my shoes." They took him to the Valtrine Command Center that had been established in the old City Hall building. Jiho sat in the back of their transport vehicle between two soldiers. Neither of them spoke. He watched Sol pass by the windows. The streets were mostly empty. Valtrine banners hung from buildings. He wondered if anyone was maintaining the traffic lights. The command center was organized chaos. Human collaborators rushed back and forth carrying tablets and files. Valtrine officers stood at stations, processing information on holographic displays. Everyone moved with terrified efficiency. Jiho was led down several corridors to a white room with a single chair and scanning equipment. "Sit," the soldier ordered. Jiho sat. They attached sensors to his head and chest. A Valtrine technician studied the monitors while another soldier watched Jiho carefully. The scanning equipment hummed to life. Immediately, the monitors began showing error messages. The technician tapped frantically at the controls. He tried again. More errors. He looked at his companion with confusion. "The readings are impossible," the technician said in the Valtrine language, not realizing Jiho could hear the translator bead in his ear. "His neural patterns are completely wrong." "Wrong how?" the soldier asked. "He has no fear response centers." "Well, he has them. But they're not connected properly. It's like looking at a brain that's been rewired. This can't be natural." They ran more tests. Each one produced the same confused reactions from the Valtrine technicians. Jiho sat patiently through all of it. He was going to be very late for work. Mina would worry. Finally, a senior officer entered the room. She was taller than the others, her armor more elaborate. She looked at the test results, then at Jiho, then back at the results. "I will test him myself," she announced. She stood in front of Jiho and placed her hand on his forehead. Her eyes began to glow brighter. Jiho felt a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity, but nothing else. The officer's expression shifted from concentration to confusion to something that might have been fear. "Impossible," she whispered, pulling her hand back. "He's empty. There's nothing there to control." "What do you mean, nothing?" another officer demanded. "Our power works by amplifying fear and awe. We find the part of the mind that worships and fears, and we make it overwhelming. But this human..." She stared at Jiho. "Those parts of his mind don't work. It's like trying to play music on an instrument with no strings." The officers conferred in rapid Valtrine. Jiho sat quietly, wondering if they'd let him go soon. Finally, they made a decision. He was to be taken to Queen Nixara herself. This was too unusual for lower ranks to handle. They moved him to a cell to wait. It was clean and empty, with a narrow bed and a toilet. Jiho lay down and took a nap. He was good at napping. Meanwhile, at the space elevator station, Mina was panicking. Jiho hadn't come to work. He never missed work. She tried calling his phone, but there was no answer. She asked around, but no one had seen him. Finally, she accessed the building's security system, something she wasn't supposed to do, and saw the footage of Valtrine soldiers taking him away. Her hands shook as she made a decision. She had to tell someone. She had to help him. But who could stand against the Valtrine? Hours later, Jiho was brought before Queen Nixara. They led him into what had once been the presidential Blue House, now converted into the Queen's residence. The halls were lined with Valtrine guards. Human servants scurried past with their eyes downcast. Everyone radiated fear except Jiho, who was mostly curious about the architecture. The throne room was unnecessarily dramatic. Dark curtains, floating lights, an actual throne made of some black metal. Queen Nixara sat there like a statue carved from ice and cruelty. Commander Vexith stood at her right hand, his expression carefully neutral. "Leave us," the Queen commanded. Everyone left except Vexith. The massive doors closed with a boom. Jiho stood in the center of the room, looking around. The ceiling was quite high. Good acoustics, probably. "Kneel," Queen Nixara said softly. Jiho looked at her. He felt the same thing he'd felt when her hologram appeared. Nothing. She was just a person sitting in a chair. An alien person, sure, but still just a person. "Why?" he asked. The Queen's crimson eyes widened slightly. Vexith's hand moved to his weapon. No one had ever asked her why before. In 10,000 years of existence, every being she'd met had either knelt immediately or died trying to resist. "Because I command it," she said, her voice harder now. She pushed her full power at him. Psychic energy that could crush minds and break wills flooded toward Jiho like a tsunami. He felt something, a pressure maybe, like the air before a storm, but no fear, no urge to submit. He scratched his neck thoughtfully. "I don't really see the point," he said. "But okay, if it's important to you." He knelt down slowly, clearly doing it as a choice rather than compulsion. The Queen stood up from her throne abruptly. Vexith drew his weapon halfway before she raised a hand to stop him. "You truly don't feel it," she whispered, walking down the steps toward Jiho. "You're not resisting. You simply don't feel anything." "Feel what?" Jiho asked from his kneeling position. She stood in front of him now, looking down at this impossible human. For the first time in millennia, Queen Nixara felt something she'd almost forgotten. Fear. Real fear. Not the fear she inflicted on others, but the fear of the unknown. "What are you?" she asked. "Jiho. I'm a maintenance technician. I fix cooling systems mostly, but I can handle basic electrical too." "That's not what I mean." She circled him slowly. "My power doesn't work on you. That should be impossible. Every living thing we've encountered across 1,000 worlds has been susceptible. But you stand there as if I were nothing." "I'm not standing, I'm kneeling," Jiho pointed out. "You asked me to." Vexith made a noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. The Queen shot him a look that could have melted steel. "There was an experiment," the Queen said suddenly, her voice sharp with realization. 20 years ago, we detected unusual neural research being conducted on your world. Illegal modifications to human children. We didn't intervene because you weren't our concern then. But you—" She leaned closer. "You were one of those children, weren't you?" Jiho's expression didn't change, but he went very still. He didn't like thinking about the facility, about the white rooms and the tests, about the other children who had screamed while he had only felt curious. "I was in a program when I was young," he admitted. "I don't remember much about it. But you remember enough." The Queen straightened. "They modified your brain, removed your capacity for certain emotions, fear, awe, wonder. The very emotions my people feed upon." "You eat emotions?" Jiho asked, genuinely interested now. "In a manner of speaking, we consume psychic energy generated by those emotions. It sustains us, makes us powerful. But you?" She returned to her throne. "You're like a person without blood in a world of vampires. Useless to us, invisible to us." "So can I go back to work?" Jiho asked hopefully. The Queen laughed. It was not a kind sound. "No, little human. You're far too interesting to release. You will stay here where I can study you, where I can ensure you don't become a problem." "I won't be a problem," Jiho said. "I just want to do my job." "Commander Vexith," the Queen said, ignoring him, "assign this human to my personal service He will attend me at all times. If he truly is immune to our influence, he may prove useful. And keep this quiet. I don't want others knowing that such immunity is possible. Vexith bowed. As you command, my queen. Jiho was taken to the servants' quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the garden. It was nicer than his apartment. He sat on the bed and wondered if they'd let him call Mina to tell her he was okay. That night, Mina sat in her apartment crying. She'd managed to find out that Jiho had been taken to the Blue House. She knew what happened to people who went there. They either came back broken or didn't come back at all. She had to do something. She had to find help. She started searching online through hidden networks that the Valtrine hadn't found yet. Networks where resistance groups whispered about fighting back, where scientists shared theories about Valtrine weaknesses, where someone, anyone, might know how to save her friend. In the Blue House, Queen Nixara stood at her window, looking out at the conquered city. For the first time in 10,000 years, she'd met someone who didn't fear her. She wasn't sure if she found it refreshing or terrifying. Perhaps both. She thought about Jiho, about his empty eyes and his simple questions, about how he'd knelt only because she'd asked, not because he'd had to. There was something deeply wrong about a universe where such a thing was possible. Or perhaps, she thought with a cold smile, there was something deeply wrong with her kind. That their power only worked on those who could be afraid. That without fear to feed on, they were nothing special at all. Just people with technology and age. It was not a comfortable thought. Queen Nixara did not like uncomfortable thoughts. She decided to do what she always did with uncomfortable things. She would study them, control them, break them if necessary. This human would not disturb her peace of mind for long. Jiho's new life as a servant to the queen was strange, but not terrible. He woke early, dressed in the simple gray uniform they gave him, and waited in the antechamber until the queen needed something. Sometimes she wanted tea. Sometimes she wanted someone to stand there while she read reports. Sometimes she just stared at him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. He met the other servants. There were 12 of them. Sumin was the oldest, a woman in her 50s who had been a professor before the invasion. She moved like a ghost, her eyes always downcast. The others were similar, broken people who jumped at shadows and cried when they thought no one was watching. "Why do you look at her?" Sumin whispered to Jiho on his third day. They were polishing silver in the kitchen. "When the queen speaks to you, why do you look directly at her?" "Should I look somewhere else?" Jiho asked. Sumin's hands shook so badly she dropped the spoon she was holding. "We don't look at them. We can't. If we look at them, we feel it. The fear. It's too much." Jiho picked up the spoon for her. He didn't really understand, but he nodded anyway. He was good at nodding when people told him things he didn't understand. The queen noticed everything. She watched how he moved through the palace without the terror that marked every other human. She saw how he looked her in the eyes when she spoke, how he asked questions that no one else dared ask. "Do you sleep?" he asked her one evening while bringing her dinner. She looked up from her papers. "What? Do Valtrine sleep? I've been here a week and I've never seen you sleep. Do you get tired?" "Why does this interest you?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "I'm just curious," Jiho said, setting down the tray. "You must get tired sometimes. Everyone gets tired." The queen studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she answered, "We rest, but not like humans do. We enter a meditative state where we process the psychic energy we've consumed. It sustains us." "The energy from fear," Jiho said, remembering what she'd told him before. "Yes, from fear, from worship, from the overwhelming awe beings feel in our presence." She gestured for him to pour her wine. "It's how my people evolved," We fed on the emotional energy of prey species on our home world. Over millions of years, we grew stronger, more powerful, until we became the dominant force in our galaxy. Jiho poured the wine carefully. That sounds lonely. The Queen's hand froze halfway to the glass. What? Everyone being afraid of you all the time. That sounds lonely. For a moment, her expression shifted to something almost vulnerable. Then it hardened again. Loneliness is a small price for power. But Jiho saw something in her eyes, something old and sad and tired. He didn't say anything more. He'd learned that sometimes silence was better than talking. Days turned into weeks. Jiho's routine became familiar. Wake up, serve the Queen, eat meals with the terrified servants, sleep. He missed his old job. He missed Mina. But the palace had good heating and the food was decent, so it wasn't the worst situation he'd been in. The Queen called him to her private study one night. It was late. Most of the palace was asleep. She sat by the fire, looking more like a regular person than the terrifying ruler who controlled Earth. Sit, she commanded, pointing to the chair across from her. Jiho sat. This was unusual. Servants stood. They never sat in the Queen's presence. I want you to tell me about the facility, she said. The place where they modified you. Tell me everything. Jiho didn't want to talk about it, but he found himself speaking anyway. Maybe because she was the first person who'd asked. Maybe because it was late and the firelight made everything feel distant and dreamlike. I don't remember my parents, he began. I was very young when they gave me to the program. They told me it was for gifted children, special education. There were 20 of us. The Queen listened without interrupting. She poured him wine, which surprised him. He took a small sip and continued. They did things to our brains. Neural modifications. They said they were making us better, stronger. They wanted to remove negative emotions, fear, sadness, anger. They thought humans would be more efficient without those feelings. What happened to the others? The Queen asked softly. Jiho's expression didn't change, but his voice grew quieter. Most of them died. Their brains couldn't handle the modifications. They would scream and scream until they just stopped. 16 died. 3 survived. Me and 2 others. Where are the others now? Dead. One killed herself when she was 15. She said she felt empty and wanted to stop feeling empty. The other died in a car accident. He didn't move out of the way because he didn't feel afraid of the car. Jiho stared into the fire. I'm the only one left. The Queen was silent for a long time. The scientists who did this, what happened to them? The program was shut down. They went to prison. Dr. Kyungmi, the head scientist, died there. The others probably did too. It was 20 years ago. And you? The Queen asked. How did you survive? Jiho shrugged. I just did. I learned to pretend to feel things so people wouldn't know I was different. I got a job. I lived a normal life. It was fine. You don't feel fear. You don't feel awe. What do you feel? It was a good question. Jiho thought about it. I feel curious sometimes. I feel comfortable or uncomfortable. I like some things and dislike others. But the big feelings, the strong ones, those are gone. It's like living life through a thick window. I can see everything, but I can't quite reach it. The Queen leaned back in her chair. My people feed on strong emotions. Fear, worship, devotion. Without those, we're just ordinary beings. You're immune to us not because you're strong, but because you're empty. I know, Jiho said. Is that why you wanted to talk to me? To understand why I'm broken? You're not broken, the Queen said, surprising both of them. You're different, and difference is the most dangerous thing in the universe. It's what topples empires and kills gods. She stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, souls spread out in darkness, marked by the lights of Valtrine patrols. I'm going to tell you something, the Queen said. Something I have told no one in 1,000 years. My people are dying. Jiho joined her at the window. Dying how? We can no longer reproduce. Our birth rate has been declining for millennia. We've tried everything. Technology, genetic manipulation, crossbreeding with other species. Nothing works. In another 1,000 years, we'll be extinct. I'm sorry, Jiho said, and meant it. The Queen laughed bitterly. You're sorry? You whose species we enslaved? You, whose world we conquered? You're still living things, Jiho said simply. Dying is sad. The Queen looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Do you know why we came to Earth? Your species has the strongest psychic signatures we've ever encountered. Human emotions are so intense, so rich. You feel everything so deeply. One human provides more sustenance than 10 of most other species. So we're food, Jiho said. Yes, and hope. If we can sustain ourselves on human energy, we can survive until we find a way to reproduce again. Your species is our last chance. She turned to face him fully. We will harvest you, farm you, breed you for the strongest emotional output. It's already beginning. In facilities around your world, we're processing humans, amplifying their fear until we can drain them completely. Jiho felt something then. Not fear, but something close. A cold recognition of wrongness. You're killing them. Eventually, yes. A human can be drained many times before death. It's efficient. She said it without emotion, stating facts. This is what you need to understand, Jiho. I am not evil. I am not cruel. I am simply doing what I must for my people to survive, just as your people would do anything to survive. No, Jiho said quietly. No. The Queen's eyebrows rose. Humans wouldn't do that. Most humans wouldn't. They'd find another way. They'd sacrifice themselves before becoming monsters. The Queen smiled coldly. You have such faith in your species, but you don't even feel what they feel. How would you know what they do? Jiho had no answer for that. She was right. He didn't really understand humans. He just lived among them. Why are you telling me this? He asked instead. Because you're the only one who can hear it without breaking. Every other human I tell either dies of fear or goes mad. But you? She touched his face gently, her fingers cold. You just listen. You just accept. You're the perfect confidant, Jiho. Empty enough to hear the truth, human enough to remind me what I'm doing. She pulled her hand away and returned to her chair. Go now. Send Sumin to prepare my chamber. We're done talking. Jiho left. He walked through the dark corridors of the palace, his mind trying to process everything he'd learned. The Valtrine were farming humans, draining them like batteries, killing them slowly. And he was serving the person who ordered it all. He should feel angry, he thought. He should feel horrified. But he just felt that distant recognition of wrongness, like looking at a math problem with the wrong answer. He found Sumin in the servants' quarters and delivered the Queen's message. Then he went to his room and lay down on his bed. Sleep didn't come easily that night. He stared at the ceiling and thought about the facility where they'd broken his brain, about the children who had died screaming, about his own emotions, carved away by scalpels and machines. The scientists had thought they were making him better, stronger, free from weakness, but they'd just made him into something that could stand next to a monster and feel nothing. Maybe that was worse than dying. In her chambers, Queen Nixara stood before her mirror. She looked at her reflection and saw what she always saw. Perfection, beauty, power. But tonight, for just a moment, she saw something else. She saw a parasite wearing a crown, a dying species desperately feeding on a younger, stronger one. She pushed the thought away. She'd lived 10,000 years. She'd seen empires rise and fall. She'd watched stars die and civilizations burn. She would not feel guilt now. She would not feel doubt. But as she entered her meditation, feeding on the fear energy her people had collected that day, she found herself thinking of Jiho's words. That sounds lonely. Such a simple observation from a broken mind, and she realized it was true. She was lonely. They all were. Every Valtrine, living for thousands of years, feeding on the fear of others, unable to form real connections because everyone they met was either terrified or dead. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and they were utterly, completely alone. It was fitting, she supposed, that the only person who could talk to her without fear was someone who felt nothing at all. Empty, recognizing, empty. Two broken things sitting by a fire, pretending to be whole. 2 months passed in the palace. Jiho learned the routines, the secret passages servants used, the times when guards changed shifts. He learned which Valtrine officers were cruel and which were merely indifferent. He learned to recognize the signs of someone who had been drained recently. They moved slowly, aged years in days, their eyes hollow and dead. Suman was one of them. One morning she didn't come to work. Jiho found her in her room, staring at nothing. Her hair had gone white overnight. Her hands looked like a 90-year-old's hands, though she was barely 50. "They took me yesterday," she whispered when he brought her water. "To the collection center. They put me in a chair and turned on the machine. I felt my fear pulled out of me like they were ripping out my soul. I aged 30 years in 30 minutes. Jiho sat beside her bed. "I'm sorry. I'm going to die soon," Suman said. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded relieved. "Maybe a few more collections, maybe only one. Then my heart will stop and I'll be free." "Don't say that," Jiho said, though he wasn't sure why. "You don't understand," Suman said, looking at him with her ancient eyes. "You can't. But this isn't living. This is just waiting to die while they feed on our terror. Death would be mercy. She died 3 weeks later. Just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up." The other servants weren't surprised. Jiho helped carry her body to the incinerator. It was the first time he'd seen death up close since the facility. He expected to feel something. He felt curious about how light her body was, and wondered if fear had weight. The next day, a new servant arrived. His name was Hyunwoo, young and terrified. He cried constantly for the first week. The Valtrine found it amusing. They would walk past him just to watch him collapse in terror. Jiho tried to help him, teaching him to keep his eyes down, to move quickly and quietly. It didn't help much. "How do you stand it?" Hyunwoo asked one night. They were cleaning the dining hall after a Valtrine feast. "How do you look at them without breaking?" Jiho shrugged. "I don't feel what you feel." "I wish I didn't either," Hyunwoo said bitterly. "I wish they'd taken that from me too." That night, Hyunwoo tried to leave a message in the waste disposal, a tiny piece of paper with information about Valtrine guard rotations. It was found. Hyunwoo was taken to Commander Vexith for questioning. Jiho heard the screams from 3 floors away. They brought Hyunwoo back the next morning. He was alive, but something behind his eyes was broken. He moved like a puppet, following orders but never speaking. They'd drained him too much, too fast. His mind had shattered. That was when Jiho decided he couldn't just watch anymore. He started small. When the Queen asked him to retrieve documents from her study, he memorized everything he saw: patrol schedules, supply routes, names of human collaborators. He had a good memory. The facility had taught him to remember things precisely. He also started exploring. The palace was huge, with sections that even servants didn't enter. Jiho found ways to slip into restricted areas during his duties. He was good at being invisible. People didn't notice him because he didn't trigger their instincts. He was just there, unremarkable and forgettable. In a laboratory on the 3rd floor, he found Valtrine biological samples. Blood, tissue, technical manuals about their physiology. He stole small amounts, hiding them in his clothes. No one searched servants who showed no fear. They assumed fear was the only reason to steal. The problem was what to do with the information. He had no way to contact anyone outside the palace. Servants were isolated, monitored. Any attempt to communicate was met with immediate punishment. Then Mina found him. She came as a delivery driver bringing food supplies to the palace kitchen. She'd gotten false papers, dyed her hair, lost weight to change her appearance. She'd spent 2 months planning this, building courage she didn't know she had. When she saw Jiho carrying dishes through the kitchen, she almost cried out. Instead, she knocked over a box of vegetables near him. "Sorry," she said loudly, kneeling to pick them up. Jiho knelt to help. Their hands touched on a potato. Mina pressed a tiny communicator into his palm, disguised as a button. "Tonight," she whispered. 11 p.m. Press it twice." Then she was gone, loading her truck and driving away. Jiho continued his work, the communicator hidden in his pocket, his expression unchanged. Inside, he felt something close to hope, or at least what he thought hope might feel like. At 11 p.m., he pressed the button twice in his room. A voice crackled softly. "Jiho, it's me. We don't have much time. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he whispered. "Mina, you shouldn't have come here. It's too dangerous." "There's a resistance," Mina said quickly. "People fighting back. Scientists studying the Valtrine. They need information. Can you help?" Jiho thought about Sumin's white hair, about Yunwoo's broken eyes, about the harvesting facilities where humans were drained like fruit. "Yes," he said. "I can help." Over the following weeks, Jiho became a spy. He passed information to Mina during her weekly deliveries, guard schedules, technology specifications, everything he found in the Queen's study. The resistance grew bolder with each piece of intelligence. One of their scientists, a woman named Heejin, became particularly interested in Jiho himself. "Your immunity," Mina told him during a brief exchange. "Heejin thinks it might be the key. If we can understand why you're immune, maybe we can replicate it, create a defense against Valtrine control." "It's because my brain is damaged," Jiho said. "They can't replicate damage." "Maybe they can," Mina insisted. "Please, let us try. Send us detailed medical records if you can find them." Jiho broke into the medical wing that night. It was risky. Guards patrolled randomly, but he moved through shadows, patient and methodical. He found his file, scans of his brain, notes about the neural modifications. He photographed everything with a camera Mina had smuggled to him. He almost made it out. Almost. Commander Vexith stepped into the corridor just as Jiho was leaving the medical wing. "You," Vexith said, his hand moving to his weapon. "What are you doing here?" Jiho's mind went blank with something that wasn't quite panic but close. He held up the medical file. "The Queen asked for my records," he said calmly. "She wants to study me further." It was a good lie. Believable. The Queen was obsessed with understanding Jiho's immunity. Vexith frowned but lowered his weapon. "Next time, get authorization first," he growled. "I could have killed you." Jiho bowed and walked away at a normal pace, even though every survival instinct he didn't have was screaming at him to run. Vexith watched him go, suspicious but unable to pinpoint why. That was close. Too close. Jiho lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was doing the right thing. He wasn't brave. He wasn't a hero. He was just broken in a way that made him useful. But usefulness was something. Maybe it was enough. The Queen noticed his distraction. She always noticed everything about him. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening. They sat in her study. She was reviewing reports. He was supposed to be standing ready for orders, but she'd told him to sit. She did that sometimes now. "I'm always quiet," Jiho said. "No, You're usually quietly curious, asking your strange questions, observing things, but lately you've been quiet in a different way. Like you're thinking about something you don't want me to know. Jiho felt that cold sensation again. She was too perceptive. I was thinking about Sumin and Hyunwoo. It wasn't entirely a lie. He did think about them. The queen set down her papers. They were weak. Weakness dies. It's the way of things. They weren't weak, Jiho said. They were human. You made them weak by breaking them. Careful, the queen said softly. Remember who you're talking to. I always know who I'm talking to, Jiho said. You're the person who told me you're farming my species to extinction because your species is dying. You're the person who sits here in luxury while humans age to death in harvesting chairs. You're the person who calls loneliness a small price for power. He expected anger. Instead, the queen looked almost sad. You really don't fear me at all, do you? She asked. You don't even hate me enough to fear my punishment. I don't know if I hate you, Jiho admitted. I don't really know what hate feels like. But I know what you're doing is wrong. Even if I can't feel strongly about it, I know. The queen stood and walked to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, cold and gentle. You're the most honest person I've ever met, she said, because you have no emotions to cloud your judgment, no fear to make you lie. You just see things as they are and say them. She smiled sadly. It's refreshing and terrifying. Because if you, without emotions, can see that what I'm doing is wrong, then what does that make me? Desperate, Jiho said, and lonely, and afraid, even if you won't admit it. The queen pulled her hand away. Get out. I'm tired of truth tonight. Jiho left. He sent the medical files to the resistance that night. Heejin studied them for days, building models, running simulations. Finally, she had an answer. It's possible, Mina told Jiho during their next exchange. Theoretically possible. If we could broadcast your neural pattern somehow, create an interference field that mimics your brain waves, it might disrupt their psychic abilities. How? Jiho asked. We'd need you, Mina said. Your brain, connected to a transmission array, broadcasting your pattern globally. It could work. It might save everyone. What would it do to me? Jiho asked, though he thought he knew. Mina was quiet for a long moment. Heejin says there's a 70% chance you'd die. Even if you survived, the neural damage could leave you catatonic, completely empty. More empty than you already are. Jiho thought about it. About a life of broken emotions and distant feelings. About Sumin dying in her bed. About Hyunwoo's shattered mind. About millions of humans in harvesting facilities around the world. Tell her to build it, he said. I'll do it. Jiho, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he said simply. What else would I do? Go back to fixing cooling systems while everyone dies? At least this way my broken brain might fix something. Mina cried on the other end of the communicator. Jiho wished he could cry with her. It seemed like the right thing to do. But he just sat there, dry-eyed and empty, planning his own death with the same careful attention he'd once used to plan maintenance schedules. The queen was right about one thing. Being empty made him see clearly. And he saw clearly that his life was worth less than saving millions. It was simple math. It didn't require emotions to understand. He just had to survive long enough to reach the transmission array. The resistance built the device in secret. It took 2 months of gathering parts, stealing Valtrine technology, and working in hidden basements around Seoul. Heejin barely slept, driven by the possibility of freeing humanity. Mina coordinated supply runs and information gathering. Others in the resistance prepared for the moment when they'd strike. They planned to use the space elevator where Jiho once worked. The transmission array at the top could broadcast globally if modified correctly. The resistance had infiltrators there ready to help. They just needed to get Jiho inside and connect him to the system. but someone was watching. Tae-jin had been watching his younger brother for months. He'd seen Ji-ho taken by the Valtrine and had mourned him as lost. When he learned Ji-ho was serving the queen herself, Tae-jin felt sick with worry. But he'd done nothing. He was a collaborator now, working as a liaison between Valtrine Command and human governments. He told himself he was helping both sides. Really, he was just surviving. Then he saw the surveillance footage. Ji-ho meeting with delivery drivers. Ji-ho in restricted areas. Small inconsistencies that Valtrine security had missed, but that a worried brother would notice. Tae-jin started investigating carefully. He traced Mina, found her connections to the resistance, discovered the entire plot. Tae-jin sat in his apartment for 3 days, trying to decide what to do. His brother was going to die, the plan would fail, the resistance would be crushed. Ji-ho didn't understand how powerful the Valtrine were, how complete their control was. If Tae-jin reported it, Ji-ho would be executed. The resistance would be destroyed. But the Valtrine might reward Tae-jin, might give him more power, more safety, maybe even protect him when things got worse. If Tae-jin did nothing, Ji-ho would die anyway when the plan failed. And Tae-jin would be executed for knowing about it and staying silent. There was no good choice. Only survival or death. Tae-jin chose survival. He went to Commander Vexith with everything, names, locations, the entire plan. He told himself he was doing it to save his brother. That reporting it now might lead to mercy. That the Valtrine would see Ji-ho was misguided but not evil. He was wrong. The Valtrine moved fast. Strike teams hit resistance cells across Seoul simultaneously. The hidden basement where Heejin worked was breached within hours. She managed to destroy most of the research, but they caught her trying to escape. 23 resistance fighters died that night. 30 more were captured. Mina was at the space elevator station when the raids began. Someone in the resistance sent a warning just in time. She ran. She'd been ready to run for months with supplies hidden and escape routes planned. She made it to a safe house on the edge of the city and watched the news reports with tears streaming down her face. Everyone was gone. Everyone except her. And she couldn't warn Ji-ho because doing so would confirm his involvement. In the palace, Ji-ho knew nothing until Commander Vexith came for him at dawn. They didn't knock. They just broke down his door and dragged him from his bed. 6 guards, all armed, even though Ji-ho had never shown any violence. They took him to the palace dungeon, a place he hadn't known existed. The cell was cold and dark. Ji-ho sat on the floor and waited. He'd known this might happen. He'd accepted the risk. He just hoped the others had escaped. Hours passed. Then the door opened. Commander Vexith entered, followed by 2 guards. "Your brother sends his regards," Vexith said. Ji-ho felt something cold and heavy settle in his chest. Not quite betrayal. He didn't feel emotions strongly enough for that. But a recognition of wrongness, a disappointment that tasted like metal. "Tae-jin told you," Ji-ho said. It wasn't a question. "Everything," Vexith confirmed. "The resistance, your spying, the plan to use your neural pattern as a weapon. He was very thorough." Vexith smiled without warmth. "He cried while he told us. Said he was doing it to save you. Humans are so good at lying to themselves." They tortured him. Not with psychic powers, which didn't work, but with physical pain. Electricity, water, breaking bones. Ji-ho felt all of it. His brain might not process fear properly, but it processed pain just fine. He screamed. He begged them to stop, but he didn't tell them anything they didn't already know. After hours, Vexith called it off. "This is pointless. He can't tell us anything new. And the Queen wants him alive." They threw Ji-ho back in his cell. He lay on the cold floor, body broken, and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Tae-jin, about his older brother who used to protect him when they were children, about how fear changed people, made them betray everything they'd once loved. He thought about the resistance fighters who died, about Heejin's research, destroyed, about Mina, hopefully safe somewhere, about how his plan had failed before it even began. He thought about Suman, lucky to have died before seeing this, about Hyun Woo's broken eyes, about all the humans suffering in harvesting facilities while he'd played spy and accomplished nothing. Maybe this was better. Maybe he deserved this for thinking he could matter, for thinking his broken brain could save anyone. Queen Nixara came to him on the second day. She stood outside his cell, looking at his bruised and bleeding body with an expression he couldn't read. "Did you really think you could defeat us?" she asked softly. Jiho tried to sit up. His ribs screamed in protest. "Yes." "Why? You've seen our power, our technology. You know we've conquered 1,000 worlds." "Because you're parasites," Jiho said, blood on his lips. "And parasites die when they kill their host. You need us more than we need you. Eventually, someone will figure that out. Maybe not me, maybe not today, but someone will." The queen was quiet for a long moment. "Your brother saved your life, you know. If he hadn't reported you, we would have killed you when we discovered the plot. But because he came to us first, he negotiated for your life. You'll be imprisoned here until you die of old age, but you'll live." "That wasn't mercy," Jiho said. "That was Taejin's guilt looking for absolution." "Perhaps." The queen turned to leave, then stopped. "I liked talking to you. Before this, you were the only one who wasn't afraid, the only one who could hear me without breaking. I'll miss that." "You could stop," Jiho said. "You could find another way." "There is no other way," the queen said. "My people survive or they die. That's the only choice I have." She left. Jiho was alone again. Days passed. They brought him food and water, but nothing else. His body healed slowly. No one spoke to him. He was forgotten, left to rot in darkness. He lost track of time. Days became weeks, became months, maybe. It was hard to tell without windows. He thought about everything. About his life of broken emotions and distant feelings. About the facility that had made him this way. About the children who died screaming while he'd just watched, curious and empty. About choosing to work with the resistance. About dying here, alone, having changed nothing. He thought about the queen's loneliness, about how she'd seemed almost grateful for his honesty, about how even monsters could be victims of their own nature. He thought about humanity. About Mina's tears, and Suman's relief at death, and Hyunwoo's shattered mind, and Taejin's betrayal. About how fear made people do terrible things, but also brave things. Mina had risked everything to help him. Heijin had worked until the end. Others had died fighting. He couldn't feel their courage strongly, couldn't feel the fierce determination that drove them. But he could recognize it, could understand it intellectually even if he couldn't experience it emotionally. Maybe that was enough. Maybe understanding was a kind of feeling too. Above him in the palace, Queen Nixara stood at her window looking out at Seoul. The harvesting had increased. Production was up. More humans were being processed every day. Her people were well fed. The empire was secure. But she felt no satisfaction. She just felt empty. She'd told Jiho that loneliness was a small price for power. But what if the price was higher than she'd admitted? What if the price was everything that made life worth living? She pushed the thought away. She'd lived 10,000 years. She would live 10,000 more. Feelings were temporary. Power was eternal. She would not doubt herself now. But late at night, she found herself thinking about the human in the cell below. The only person who'd ever spoken to her as an equal. The only person whose mind she couldn't touch. The only person who'd seen her clearly and called her lonely and desperate and afraid. He was right, of course. She was all those things. But admitting it changed nothing. The harvesting would continue, her people would survive, and Jiho would die in darkness, having changed nothing. That was how the universe worked. The strong survived, the weak died, and the ones who couldn't feel either way just watched it all happen, empty and alone. In her dreams, which were really meditation, Queen Nixara fed on the fear of thousands. But for the first time in millennia, the feast tasted like ash. In his cell, Jiho slept dreamlessly. He'd given up on escape, given up on rescue, given up on mattering. He just existed, day after day, waiting for his body to give out, waiting for the end. He didn't know that Mina was still out there, that she'd found another scientist, an old colleague of Heejin's named Doyun, that they were rebuilding the research from memory and stolen fragments, that the resistance, wounded but not dead, was regrouping. He didn't know that Taejin couldn't sleep anymore. That his brother sat in his apartment every night staring at his hands, unable to wash away the feeling of blood. That Taejin was slowly going mad with guilt. He didn't know that above the palace, hidden in orbit, human ships were gathering. The Valtrine controlled Earth, but they hadn't found all of humanity's weapons, hadn't located every military base, hadn't broken every soldier's will. Jiho didn't know any of this. He just knew darkness and cold and the slow passage of empty time. But sometimes, in the space between waking and sleep, he remembered something the Queen had said. Difference is the most dangerous thing in the universe. It's what topples empires and kills gods. He held on to that thought. In the darkness, it was all he had. Maybe his difference still mattered. Maybe his broken brain still had purpose. Maybe the story wasn't over yet. Or maybe it was. Maybe this was the end, empty and alone, just like he'd always been. Only time would tell. And Jiho had nothing but time. 6 months passed in darkness. Jiho marked time by counting meals. 3 meals a day meant roughly 180 days. His body had healed. His mind remained clear. He did exercises to stay strong, push-ups, sit-ups, running in place. It gave him something to do besides think. Above ground, the world was changing. The harvesting had intensified. Entire cities were being processed. Humans lived in constant terror, knowing they could be called to the collection centers at any moment. Some people killed themselves rather than face the draining. Others went mad. The Valtrine didn't care. There were always more humans to harvest. But resistance was growing too. In hidden places, in secret networks, humans were learning to fight back. They studied captured Valtrine technology. They planned coordinated attacks. They died by the hundreds, but each death taught them something new. Mina worked 18-hour days in a hidden laboratory. Doyen had managed to reconstruct most of Heejin's research. The neural broadcasting device could work. They just needed Jiho. Without him, it was just theory and hopes. "We have to get him out," Mina said for the 100th time. Young-Soo, the resistance leader, shook his head. "The palace is impossible. We've tried. We've lost good people trying. Jiho is gone." "Then we fail," Mina said flatly, "because the device needs his specific neural pattern. No one else's will work. It has to be him." A young fighter named Hyejin spoke up. "What about the brother? Taejin. He got Jiho captured. Maybe he could get him out." "Why would he?" someone else asked. "He's a collaborator." "He chose the Valtrine." "Guilt," Mina said slowly. "People do strange things when guilt eats them alive. I've seen the reports. Taejin has stopped going to work, stopped eating. He's dying slowly. Maybe we can use that." It was a desperate plan, but everything was desperate now. They had nothing to lose. Mina went to Taejin's apartment alone. She knocked on his door at midnight. When he answered, she barely recognized him. He'd lost 20 pounds. His eyes were hollow. His hands shook constantly. "I'm here to give you a chance," Mina said. "One chance to make things right." Taijin stared at her. "Nothing can make things right. Your brother is dying in a cell. You put him there. You can get him out." "They'll kill me," Taijin whispered. "You're already dying," Mina said. "At least die doing something good." Taijin let her inside. They talked through the night. By dawn, he'd agreed. Not because he believed it would work, not because he thought it would absolve him, but because dying while trying to save Jiho was better than dying while remembering how he'd betrayed him. The plan was complex. Taijin still had access to the palace. His credentials hadn't been revoked. He could move through certain areas. He couldn't reach Jiho's cell directly, but he could create a distraction, could disable some security systems, could give the resistance an opening. They spent 2 weeks preparing, gathering explosives, mapping guard rotations, training fighters. They knew most of them would die. They prepared for it, wrote goodbye letters, made peace with their choices. The night of the rescue, Taijin walked into the palace like he'd done 100 times before, his credentials cleared. Guards nodded at him. He carried a briefcase with explosives hidden inside. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. He made it to the security control room. 2 guards were there. He shot them both with a stolen Valtrine weapon before they could react. His hands shook so badly he almost missed, but they went down. He locked the door and started disabling systems. Alarms began blaring immediately. Taijin worked faster, his fingers flying over the controls. He opened cell doors throughout the dungeon, disabled weapons systems, crashed surveillance. Then he armed the explosives and ran. The resistance strike team hit the palace from 3 directions. They'd never coordinated something this large before. Fighters who'd trained for months, people who'd lost everything to the Valtrine. They poured through the breached walls, fighting with desperate fury. Mina was with them. She carried a weapon she barely knew how to use and fear that threatened to overwhelm her. But she pushed forward. They had to reach Jiho. Nothing else mattered. In his cell, Jiho heard the alarms, heard the explosions. His door unlocked with a click. He stood slowly, muscles stiff from disuse, and walked out into chaos. The dungeon was full of freed prisoners, confused and disoriented. Jiho moved past them, following the sounds of fighting. He found Mina on the 3rd floor. She was bleeding from a cut on her head, firing her weapon at Valtrine guards. When she saw him, she screamed his name. "We have to go," she shouted. "Now!" "Where?" Jiho asked. "The space elevator! The device is ready! We can do this!" They ran. The palace was a war zone. Resistance fighters died around them, buying seconds with their lives. Jiho saw Taijin across a corridor. His brother was shooting at Valtrine soldiers, tears streaming down his face. Their eyes met. Taijin smiled sadly. Then he triggered something on his vest. The explosion took him and 5 Valtrine soldiers, clearing the path ahead. Jiho felt something then. Not quite grief, but a recognition of loss, of sacrifice, of a brother who'd chosen wrong but ended right. They made it outside. A stolen Valtrine transport waited. Doyun was at the controls. "Get in! They're coming!" They flew through the city. Valtrine ships pursued them. The transport took hit after hit. Doyun kept it flying through skill and desperation. They crashed into the space elevator station's parking structure. The ship was destroyed, but they were alive. Inside the station, resistance fighters held the lower floors. But Valtrine forces were everywhere. Commander Vexith himself led the assault. He'd realized where they were going, what they were trying to do. Mina led Jiho to the transmission array at the station's peak. Doyun and a team of technicians were already there, making final preparations. The device looked crude, cobbled together from stolen technology and human ingenuity. Wires everywhere, jury-rigged connections. But it might work. "You have to lie down here," Doyun said, pointing to a medical chair. "We'll connect you to the system. It'll read your neural patterns and broadcast them globally." What happens to me? Jiho asked. Doyun couldn't meet his eyes. You'll probably die. Even if you don't, the neural strain will leave you brain dead. I'm sorry. We have no other way. Jiho nodded. He'd known this was coming. Had accepted it 6 months ago. He looked at Mina. Thank you, he said, for being my friend. Mina was crying. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, Jiho said, echoing the Queen's words. And this is what I'm for. My broken brain can finally fix something. He lay down in the chair. Technicians attached sensors to his head and chest. Doyun worked the controls, calibrating the system. Below them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Valtrine forces were advancing floor by floor. We need 5 minutes, Doyun said. 5 minutes for the system to map his patterns and begin broadcasting. You'll have them, Mina said. She picked up her weapon and headed for the door. The remaining resistance fighters formed a defensive line. 20 humans against an army of Valtrine. They knew they'd die. They died anyway. One by one they fell, buying seconds, buying minutes. Commander Vexith broke through. He stood in the doorway, surrounded by his soldiers, and saw what they were trying to do. Stop them, he roared. Mina fired, hit nothing. Vexith raised his hand, and psychic energy slammed into her. She collapsed, screaming, aged years in seconds. Other resistance fighters charged. Vexith killed them without effort. Then Queen Nixara arrived. She walked through the battle like it didn't exist. Her presence made everyone freeze. Valtrine soldiers knelt. Human fighters collapsed in terror. She moved past them all, her crimson eyes fixed on Jiho. He lay in the chair, connected to the machine. Doyun worked frantically at the controls. 2 minutes left. Maybe 3. Stop! The Queen commanded. Doyun's hands froze on the controls. He tried to move. Couldn't. Her power held him completely. The Queen walked to Jiho. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. You would really die to stop me? She asked softly. Yes, Jiho said. His voice was steady. He felt no fear, just certainty. Why? You don't even feel things properly. You told me yourself. You're empty. I'm empty, Jiho agreed. But I'm not blind. I can see what you're doing. I can see it's wrong. That's enough. The Queen touched his face. Her hand was cold. I could stop this. I could kill everyone here, destroy the machine, continue as we have been. You could, Jiho said. But you don't think I will, the Queen said. It wasn't a question. I think you're tired, Jiho said. I think you've been tired for a long time. I think part of you wants this to end. Queen Nixara closed her eyes. Behind her, Vexith started to move forward. She raised her other hand without looking and stopped him with a gesture. Do you know what it's like? She asked, her voice barely audible. 10,000 years of feeding on fear. 10,000 years of being worshipped and hated. 10,000 years without a single genuine connection. Without anyone who could look at me and see just another person. I'm sorry, Jiho said. You were the first, the Queen continued. The first in 10 millennia who could talk to me without breaking, who could hear the truth without dying. I valued that, more than I admitted. More than I should have. She opened her eyes. They were wet. Jiho had never seen a Valtrine cry before. My people are dying anyway, she whispered. Slower, but dying. We're a dead species. We've been dead for 1,000 years. We just haven't stopped moving yet. She looked at the machine, at Doyun, frozen at the controls, at the resistance fighters lying broken on the floor, at Mina, aged and dying from her brief exposure to Valtrine power. If I let you do this, the Queen said, my entire species ends today. Every Valtrine in the galaxy loses their power, becomes mortal, vulnerable. Many will be killed by those they enslaved. I know, Jiho said. But if I stop you, the Queen continued, humanity dies slowly while my people feed, and we remain powerful, remain eternal, remain utterly, completely alone. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped back. "Do it," she said to Doyen. Vexith screamed in protest. "My queen, no!" "I am tired, Vexith," the queen said. "So tired. For 10,000 years I've carried the weight of our species, but we're not worth saving. We're just parasites in crowns. Maybe it's time we learned what death feels like." She released Doyen. He stared at her in shock, then lunged for the controls. His fingers flew over the interface. The machine hummed to life. Jiho felt it start, a pulling sensation inside his head, the machine reading his neural patterns, learning the shape of his broken mind, preparing to broadcast it to the world. "Will it hurt?" he asked. "Yes," Doyen said honestly. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," Jiho said. He looked at the queen. "Thank you." She smiled sadly. "Thank you, Jiho, for showing me that even emptiness can have purpose, that even broken things can matter." The broadcast began. Jiho screamed. Pain like he'd never imagined filled his skull. His neural patterns transmitted globally, a wave of interference spreading across Earth at the speed of light. Every Valtrine felt it, their psychic powers disrupted, failed, vanished. Ships fell from the sky. Weapons systems crashed. The Valtrine Empire collapsed in seconds. Queen Nixara felt her power leave, 10,000 years of immortality draining away. She fell to her knees, felt weakness for the first time in millennia, felt her body begin to age, felt mortality wrap around her like a familiar coat she'd forgotten she owned. She smiled. It hurt. Everything hurt. But the emptiness, the terrible, crushing loneliness, was finally gone. She was just a person now, just another being facing death. It was the most human she'd ever felt. The broadcast completed. Jiho went still in the chair. His eyes stared at nothing. Doyen checked his vital signs and started crying. Mina crawled to the chair, took Jiho's hand. It was still warm. She held it and cried for the friend who'd saved them all by being broken. The broadcast reached every corner of Earth in seconds. In harvesting facilities, Valtrine operators suddenly lost control of their machines. In military command centers, psychic weapons systems failed. In cities across the world, humans who had been frozen in terror for 8 months suddenly found they could move again, could think again, could resist. The collapse was immediate and total. Valtrine ships crashed. Some tried to flee into orbit and found their engines dead. Others crashed into buildings, into oceans, into empty fields. Thousands of Valtrine died in the first hour, many more in the chaos that followed. Humans rose up everywhere. They'd been beaten down, harvested, terrorized, but they were still human, still capable of rage and courage. They attacked Valtrine soldiers who suddenly found themselves mortal and vulnerable. They stormed facilities and freed prisoners. They tore down the banners and monuments the Valtrine had erected. It was bloody. It was vengeful. It was human. At the space elevator station, Commander Vexith tried to rally his soldiers. But without their psychic powers, they were just ordinary beings with weapons. The resistance fighters who remained overwhelmed them quickly. Vexith died fighting, which was probably what he wanted. Queen Nixara didn't fight. She just knelt on the floor, feeling her body age minute by minute. Doyen wanted to arrest her. Mina said no. "She let us do this," Mina said, her voice hoarse. "She could have stopped us. She chose not to." "She's killed millions," Doyen argued. "She deserves to die." "Maybe," Mina said, "but not here. Not now. Let someone else decide." They took the queen into custody. She didn't resist. They found medical attention for Mina and the other survivors, and they stood guard over Jiho's body, unsure what to do with the man who'd saved humanity at the cost of everything. The world tried to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Governments had collapsed. Infrastructure was damaged. Millions had died in the harvesting or the rebellion. The Valtrine who survived were rounded up and imprisoned in camps. Human anger demanded blood, revenge, justice. Youngsu found himself leading the provisional government. He didn't want the job, but someone had to do it, and he was one of the few resistance leaders who survived. He faced impossible questions every day. What to do with the Valtrine prisoners, how to feed displaced populations, how to prevent humans from tearing each other apart over who had collaborated and who had resisted. 3 months after the broadcast, a scientist named Dami made a discovery. She'd been studying Valtrine biology, looking for ways to help the prisoners who were dying in their camps. The Valtrine needed psychic energy to survive. Without it, they aged rapidly. They were dying by the hundreds each week. We could just let them die, some people argued. They deserve it. That makes us monsters, others said. We fought to stop them from farming us. We can't turn around and farm them. Dami proposed a solution. Their biology is compatible with human biology. If we modify their DNA, we could make them able to survive without psychic energy. They'd be truly mortal, limited lifespans, but alive. It was controversial. Half of humanity wanted the Valtrine dead. The other half wanted to prove humans were better than their conquerors. The debate raged for weeks. Young-Su visited Queen Nixara in her cell. She looked old now, lines on her face, gray in her hair. She'd aged from appearance of 30 to appearance of 60 in 3 months. Soon, she'd be dead. We have a treatment, Young-Su said. It could save your people, make you mortal, truly mortal, no powers, no longevity, just ordinary lifespans like any other species. The Queen looked at him with eyes that had lost their crimson glow. Why would you do this? Because someone once told me that even broken things can matter, Young-Su said. That even parasites deserve a chance to change. Who said that? The Queen asked. A friend. He's sleeping right now. Has been for 3 months. The Queen sat up straighter. Ji-ho is alive. Barely, coma. The doctors say his brain activity is minimal. He'll probably never wake up, but his heart's still beating. The Queen closed her eyes. I want to see him. That can be arranged, Young-Su said, if you agree to the treatment, if you help us convince other Valtrine to accept it too. You're negotiating for their lives, the Queen said. I'm giving you a chance to save them, Young-Su corrected. Take it or don't. But decide fast. Every day, more of them die. The Queen agreed. The treatment began. It wasn't perfect. Some Valtrine died during the process. Others refused it and chose death over becoming mortal. But most accepted it. They'd lived for thousands of years. They wanted to keep living, even if it meant being ordinary. Queen Nixara was the first to undergo the full treatment. It took weeks. When it was done, she was fully mortal, aging at a normal rate. Her body would last maybe 30 more years. Then death. Real death. No coming back. She found it terrifying and liberating in equal measure. They took her to see Ji-ho 6 months after the broadcast. He lay in a hospital bed, machines monitoring his vital signs. His eyes were open but empty. He breathed. His heart beat. But there was no one home. The neural broadcast had burned away what little consciousness he'd had left. The Queen sat beside his bed. Guards watched from the doorway but gave her space. Hello, Ji-ho, she said softly. I'm old now. Can you believe it? I'm going to die someday. A real death. I should be terrified. Maybe I am. I'm still learning how to feel things properly. She took his hand. It was warm, living, but empty. You were right, she continued, about everything. We were parasites. We were lonely. We were afraid. And you, with your broken brain, saw it clearly when no one else could. She stayed for an hour, talking to him, telling him about the Valtrine who'd survived, about the humans who were learning to forgive, about the world slowly healing. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. When she left, Mina was waiting outside. Do you visit him? The Queen asked. Every day, Mina said. I talk to him, Tell him what's happening. I don't know if he can hear, but I do it anyway." "He'd appreciate that," the Queen said. "He always liked your company." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Two people who'd been enemies. Now just people trying to understand a world that had changed too fast. "I'm sorry," the Queen said finally, "for everything we did, for the harvesting, the deaths, the terror. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back," Mina said, but her voice wasn't angry, just sad. "I know, but it's all I have to offer." Mina nodded. "Then I accept it, for Jiho. He'd want me to." The world continued to turn. Seasons changed. Slowly, incredibly slowly, things got better. The Valtrine who'd accepted treatment were released into human society. Most struggled. They'd lived as gods for millennia, and now they were just people. Some adapted, others didn't. Suicide rates among former Valtrine were high. Queen Nixara became an unexpected advocate for reconciliation. She traveled the world, speaking at memorials for harvesting victims. Telling the truth about what her people had done, facing human anger with quiet acceptance. Some people wanted her dead, others saw her as a symbol of change. She aged gracefully. Gray hair turned white. Lines deepened on her face. She looked like a grandmother now. She found it strange and wonderful. 1 year after the broadcast, she was giving a speech at Seoul Memorial when someone in the crowd shouted, "Jiho's awake!" The crowd erupted. Mina was already running toward the hospital. The Queen followed, her old legs protesting but carrying her anyway. They found him sitting up in bed looking confused. Doctors surrounded him, running tests. His brain scans showed activity. Not much, but something. Mina pushed through the crowd. "Jiho, can you hear me?" He turned his head slowly. His eyes focused on her. Recognition flickered. "Mina," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. She started crying. "You're back. Oh God, you're back." "Am I?" Jiho asked. He looked around the room, saw the Queen standing in the doorway. "Why does everyone look so old?" The Queen laughed. It was a sound of pure joy. "Because we are old, Jiho. It's been a year." "A year?" Jiho tried to sit up further. "What happened?" They told him. About the broadcast, about the collapse of the Valtrine Empire, about the treatment and the recovery and the slow path toward peace. He listened with his usual calm expression. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Did it work?" he finally asked. "Are people free?" "Yes," Mina said. "Because of you." Jiho nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." The doctors ran more tests. His brain had been severely damaged. Large portions of his memory were gone. His cognitive functions were reduced. But he was alive, conscious. Himself, more or less. Recovery was slow. He had to relearn basic things, how to walk properly, how to feed himself. His long-term memory was patchy. He remembered his childhood, remembered working at the space elevator. But the time in the palace was mostly gone. He didn't remember serving the Queen, didn't remember the torture or the resistance or the plan. "Maybe that's better," Mina said. "Some memories are better forgotten." "Did I do good things?" Jiho asked one day. "Before, when I can't remember." "You did the best thing," Mina said. "You saved everyone." "Oh." Jiho thought about this. "That's nice. I wish I remembered it." The Queen visited him often. He didn't remember her, but she told him stories about their conversations, about how he'd asked if she slept, about how he'd called her lonely, about how she'd cried when he activated the broadcast. "You changed me," she told him. "You showed me that power isn't worth losing everything else." "Did I?" Jiho asked. "I don't remember being that smart." "You weren't smart," the Queen said gently. "You were honest. Sometimes that's more important." 5 years passed. Jiho recovered enough to live independently. He got a small apartment. Mina visited weekly. They'd have tea and talk about nothing important. He seemed content, The Valtrine integrated into human society. It wasn't perfect. There were tensions, occasional violence, but mostly, people just tried to live their lives. The former immortals discovered the joy of sunrises when you know they're limited. The pleasure of food when you actually need it to survive. The warmth of connections that weren't based on fear. Queen Nixara, now just Nixara, became a teacher. She taught history at a university. Students were initially terrified of her, then fascinated, then just used to her presence. She was tough, but fair. She told stories about the rise and fall of empires, about the dangers of power, about the importance of connections. She visited Jiho on his birthday every year. He never remembered her from year to year. She told him the same stories each time. He listened with genuine interest, like he was hearing them for the first time. Because he was. "Do you mind?" she asked once. "That you can't remember?" Jiho thought about it. "I don't think so. Mina says I did something important. That's enough. I don't need to remember it to know it mattered." Nixara smiled. She was old now, really old, maybe 5 years left. 10 if she was lucky. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive she'd ever felt. "You're wise," she told him. "I'm broken," Jiho said simply. "But maybe broken things can still be useful." "They can," Nixara agreed. "They really can." She died 7 years after the broadcast, peacefully, in her sleep. She was buried in a small ceremony with humans and Valtrine in attendance. Mina brought Jiho. He didn't remember her, but when Mina explained who she was, he placed a flower on her grave. "She sounds like she was interesting," he said. "She was," Mina agreed. "She was terrible and wonderful and everything in between, just like people are." Humanity continued. The Valtrine continued. They built a new world together. Not perfect, nothing was perfect, but better. More honest, more real. At the memorial park where they'd built a statue of the resistance fighters who died in the palace assault, there was a small plaque for Jiho. It said simply, "He stood when others knelt. He gave everything. He asked for nothing." Jiho visited it once with Mina. He read the plaque and looked confused. "That's you," Mina explained. "That's what you did." "Oh," Jiho said. He studied the plaque for a long moment. "I hope I was brave." "You were the bravest," Mina said, "because you were brave without even feeling fear." "That doesn't make sense," Jiho said. "How can you be brave if you're not afraid?" "I don't know," Mina admitted. "But you figured it out somehow." They stood together in the park, two survivors of a war that changed everything. The sun was setting. The air was cool. In the distance, human and Valtrine children played together, too young to remember the occupation, too young to carry hate. "Do you ever regret it?" Mina asked. "What you lost?" Jiho thought about his broken memories, his damaged brain, his empty feelings. He thought about the children in the facility, about Sumin and Hyunwoo, about Taijin's sacrifice, about all the broken things that had somehow added up to something whole. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I do. Someone had to stand. It happened to be me. That's okay." They watched the children play until the sun went down. Then they went home, to their ordinary lives, in their ordinary world. A world that had been saved by the most ordinary man imaginable. A man who couldn't feel the things that made him human, but who had chosen to be human anyway. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all. The universe continued its endless turning. Stars died and were born. Civilizations rose and fell. But on one small planet, in one small corner of space, two species that should have been enemies learned to be neighbors instead. They learned that power without connection was just loneliness, that strength without purpose was just emptiness. They learned that even broken things could matter, that even empty hearts could be brave, that even monsters could change if someone was brave enough to show them the truth. And high above the planet, in the space station where it all began, they installed a coolant valve with a small inscription. Maintained by Jiho, who fixed more than machines. It was a small thing, a quiet memorial. But Jiho would have liked it. He always did like things that worked properly, and in the end, against all odds, everything worked. Not perfectly, but enough. More than enough. It was enough.